for what the nurses saw. I interviewed nurses all over the country and Canada, and they told the same identical story of how things were handled. And so to bring this back to the Nazi era, when they drove all the Jewish physicians out of medicine, they they brought in all these, well, literal Nazis, not figurative, not metaphorical, literal Nazis whose first adherence and loyalty was to the Fuhrer. And so if the Fuhrer said, kill this guy, they just went ahead and did it. And I'm afraid we have a similar pattern in this country where the good doctors and the good nurses are being so discouraged and so abused that many of them are leaving practice. And what are they being replaced by? People for whom being a nurse is just a payday. And you know, during COVID, especially in the early months, when the Department of Homeland Security was issuing the paychecks via private contractors, nurses were making $10,000 a week. That's a week. I didn't say a month, a week. So I mean, there are a lot of people that aren't able to say no to $10,000 a week. In fact, I mean, you could bribe the average politician for far less. And so anyway, so going back to all these different Nuremberg strands. So those were the Nuremberg laws, first identifying who were the Jewish people, and then systematically using that identification to pass laws to ban them from all kinds of things, but for our purposes, the practice of medicine and nursing and public health, which facilitated the original Holocaust, which was the murder of handicapped people. A lot of people aren't aware of that. It started with a program to kill disabled infants, then disabled children, then disabled older people, and the entire methodology, the transporting of them to single facilities. Initially, they used buses, the experimentation with gas, all that started on handicapped people, and it was executed by Nazi doctors who had replaced the normal culture of German medicine. So that's the Nuremberg laws, right? Then there's the Nuremberg trial, and then the Nuremberg trial. So there was one huge trial that was truly multinational, the Allies, basically, the Russians, the French, the UK, the US, and that was the high profile trial. And that was what the film was about. There's a film that came out called Nuremberg. It showed for a few weeks in the theaters last year in order to qualify for the Academy Award. I'm going to guess it's going to get a few nominations. So people are going to be thinking about the Nuremberg trial, which is why I wanted to be on your show, which I really appreciate you letting me be on to explain this. So there was that one big trial, but then it broke up, and the trials were then held by the Americans only, the further trials, the French only, and the Russians only. And so what's interesting, and I think people need to know this, is the extent of the murder and mayhem that the Nazis carried out in Russia was unbelievable. I just want to check my numbers here to make sure I get it right. Civilian deaths in Russia, somewhere between 13 and 15 million.
Yeah.
Just in Russia alone. Part of that was by forced starvation. So they would be, these were rural communities. This is pre-highway, right? No superhighway. You couldn't jump into the SUV and go to Walmart and stock up on groceries. You grew what you grew. You stored it on the farm. So the Germans just came through, and the Nazis just came through, took everything in the beginning of winter and said, we'll see you in the spring. And many, many, many families just starved to death. There was no place for them to go. But they did something else, which is they would round up the entire village, put them in the local church, put them in barns, and then just set them aflame and stand around with machine guns and gun anybody down who didn't come in. They did this in thousands of villages. And unfortunately, this is a part of the history that people aren't aware of, and they should be aware that there was this other side to the catastrophe. So then the next Nuremberg thing that a lot of people refer to, and we've talked about it already, is the Nuremberg Code itself. And that came out of one of the subsequent trials that was run by America only, called the Doctors Trial. And now, interestingly, I did some math. Believe it or not, there were at least 20,000 work camps, forced labor camps throughout Germany. There were a lot of them. And 1/4 of the German industrial force during the war was forced labor. So they would sometimes they grabbed Germans who had the wrong political opinion. Sometimes they grabbed Frenchmen right off the street, but mostly they took Russians and Poles, Jewish people, and distributed them through these camps. They were run by the SS. it was a business. The SS got paid for the labor, and then from the labor, they housed and fed and secured the workers. And a lot of these camps had a doctor. So if there were 20,000 camps, there were probably hundreds, if not thousands, of doctors and medical professionals working at these camps. And one of the things they did, were aware of the mass extermination of people, but they also killed people one off. So you're working on the line, you're sick, they send you to the infirmary because they hope they can patch you up because they kind of needed the labor. And they looked at you and said, this guy's useless. He's never going to get better. And they'd kill you on the spot with an injection to the heart of phenol. Yep. So that was one of the things that these doctors were tried for. They were also tried for, this is really, you'll appreciate this. They were tried for falsifying death records.
Yep.
That was one of the hanging offenses. And some of those guys were hanged. However, there were only, I forget the exact number, it might be 24, I think. There were only about 20, let's say 24 doctors and one nurse that were tried. So on the one hand, you had thousands of card-carrying Nazi doctors that were part of this system and surely were directly involved in the murder of innocent people. And on the other hand, we only have 24 people that made it to court.